Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. On the satellite imagery, we've got low pressure here dropping southward across western Bristol Bay toward the Alaska Peninsula, and a narrow band of showers very scattered through here and kind of dissipating into the afternoon, a little more extensive back to the northeast in the way of both cloudiness and showers, with clearing though on either side of that. Not too bad of an afternoon here across the southwest interior, west of the Alaska Range in the Kuskokwim Valley, as well as up here along the western interior, the Selawik Valley area on down into Norton Sound, and some more clearing over the Copper River Basin. Otherwise, we've got a couple of troughs bringing light snow to the Arctic coast and eastward, and also dropping down into the Brooks Range. A little bit of a break back here to the west, and another batch just behind that that'll be coming eastward across the Arctic coast over the next couple of days. Otherwise, north to south flow here across the Bering Sea has a few showers scattered in with it with the clouds. And otherwise, winds on the light side there, a little bit more enhanced area precipitation associated with the main low here near Bristol Bay that's again coming southward slowly, and then high pressure in along the southeast coast here as well as the North Gulf Coast. So a pretty dry day today, although mostly cloudy across the Panhandle. Some areas saw a little bit more sunshine, showers lingering over the southern areas there, and this high responsible for the clearing over the Copper River Basin. And then we've got showers here over the eastern interior areas, a little bit of a break up around Fort Yukon to maybe Arctic Village, but just north of there, clouds and areas of light snow on out to the west. Looking at a system developing down here to the southwest of the Panhandle, 998 millibar low currently. That's going to come northward there and deepen a little bit to 994 millibars. With the front, though, a lot of moisture coming northeastward here with a good strong southwest jet. So look for moderate rain to begin to develop, especially toward morning here over the southern southeast coast, with light rain spreading northward late tonight, possibly as far north as Juneau, and then that'll be coming across the Gulf and into the Kodiak Island area. Otherwise, here along the North Gulf Coast in southern Alaska, look for a general increase in the cloudiness late this evening, and then after midnight, begin to see areas of rain develop over western Prince William Sound and the southern portion of the western Alaska Range, possibly even Cook Inlet. Otherwise, this weak trough persisting, just some isolated showers associated with that, and that's about it. And again, these troughs keeping bands of light snow, this one sliding off mostly to the eastern Arctic coast tonight. A little bit of a breakthrough here, and then the next one slipping on down again for another round of light snow for the western Arctic coast and as well as the central areas there. Should be dry though back toward the Kotzebue Sound area, the Noatak Valley with high pressure. Northeast winds, pretty nice here for the Seward Peninsula and northern Bering. Look for showers though, leftover moisture as that trough weakens and continues southward for the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutian areas with isolated showers on out to the west, and then winds really become light here from Atka on out to Shimei and Attu. And looking ahead to Tuesday, very nice conditions, partly mostly sunny. Definitely dry, much of the interior. Could be a couple of isolated showers here over toward the east, toward Eagle, but that's about it. Really mostly cloudy here across the Copper River Basin. Could be partly sunny up here, or partly cloudy with a few more breaks than what I have drawn in there, but just very isolated showers through here. And now we've got just a narrow band of very light snow or flurries with fog that's basically right along the Arctic coast from possibly Wainwright on over toward Mackenzie River Bay. High pressure ridging up into the Bering Sea again, ahead of this system, which will mostly stay back to the north and west there as this high holds it back, but that's going to make for light winds here across St. Lawrence Island, but the gradient increases, and so become a little windier from the southwest coast, and windier yet here across the eastern Aleutians as this trough, another one develops and drops southward. Chance of showers with that, but dry on out to the west. And this front, again, good shot of rain coming up, rain heavy at times. Again, developing late tonight into tomorrow. The front moves right up to the coastline. Southeast winds, could be gale force winds associated with that. Rain back mostly across the Gulf of Alaska now, kind of pulling back a little bit in the afternoon, catching the southern Seward Peninsula, but really kind of just more showery conditions back to the west, Kodiak on down to the Alaska Peninsula, with the main rain and the heaviest precipitation will be occurring from about Yakutat on down to Dixon Entrance. And looking ahead to Wednesday, we still have a frontal boundary here right along the southeast coast, so rain heavy at times here for the northern panhandle, especially along the coast, say from Sitka, maybe Port Alexander, all the way back over to Yakutat, becoming lighter toward Cordova, and then lighter yet in Prince William Sound with a main band of moisture down across Kodiak Island. So occasional light rain possible southern Cook Inlet, most likely southern side of the Kenai Peninsula into the Aleutian Range. Looks at this point just mostly cloudy over northern Cook Inlet, and then on up into the Susitna Valley, with the interior basically dry again, just a slight chance of a shower here up over the northeast, and then just about almost clear skies will probably be occurring here from the Brooks Range on down into the Yukon Delta and the Seward Peninsula. And same pattern basically holding there along the Arctic coast, with weak troughs keeping a chance of light snow or flurries with some patchy fog, mainly along the central coast and back to the west a little bit. And good northerly winds here. Getting a little breezy, maybe gusts 35, possibly 40 miles an hour, say King Cove and Dutch Harbor there. But rain, showers, drizzle, fog, definitely cloudy, wet conditions, or damp anyway, with a little bit lower flying conditions with this moisture as it pushes southward. Winds lighten up, high pressure holding over the western Aleutians, and really not much else going on here over the northern Bering Sea. Taking a look at the forecast lows for tonight, lower to mid 40s here out over the Aleutians to near 40 of the Pribilofs on up to St. Lawrence Island. And then we've got teens now showing up in the Brooks Range area. That's Anatuvik, forecast low 17. Could be the same for Chandelar Lake. Otherwise, out along the Arctic coast now, upper 20s to lower 30s, mid 30s back to the west, and kind of a upper 20s to mid 30s pattern also here, depending on your elevation, the amount of clearing you get over the Copper River Basin. Otherwise, 30s to lower 40s elsewhere, and high temperatures for tomorrow. Mid 30s for the most part here across the North Slope, Brooks Range. Some areas maybe only in the lower 30s, but south of the mountains, Tanana Valley, lower 50s, 50 to 55. Susitna Valley, same thing for northeast Bristol Bay. Could see some lower 60s showing up there over the southern southeast coast, upper 50s to the north. And out west, not much of a change, about holding the same temperature-wise, both of the highs and lows out over the Aleutians and the Bering Sea, in that 45 to 52 degree range. And then for Wednesday, again, down into the teens here, especially across the Brooks Range, possibly the North Slope, mid to upper 20s, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and then lower 30s back to the west, and lower upper 20s to mid 30s here across the Tanana Valley, on back toward the Seward Peninsula, staying in 40s though. Definitely staying above freezing here south of the Alaska Range across south central Alaska, and on the mild side, lower 50s for the southern panhandle, 40s out to the west. And for the highs for Wednesday afternoon, not bad, 55 to 60 possibly here the Susitna Valley, lower 50s for the King Salmon area in Bristol Bay, and looks like mid to upper 50s south for the panhandle to mostly mid 50s to the north, and the Arctic coast here along the Brooks Range, temperatures mostly near freezing and about the same along the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to the aviation forecasts. Looking for some marginal VFR rolling on up here to the North Gulf Coast tonight, mainly back to the west, Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound, and IFR creeping into the southern panhandle areas of marginal and IFR here from the eastern interior, with the RFR a little more widespread up across the eastern Arctic coast. Pretty good VFR back to the west here from really the interior all the way out to a fair distance off the coast into the Bering, but marginal by the time you get to the Pribilofs, and that'll extend down to the eastern Aleutians and actually to the Alaska Peninsula. IFR backing westward here into the east side of Kodiak Island, and another swath out to the west. For tomorrow afternoon, that vanishes, and we're left with a widespread area of marginal VFR across the Bering and all of the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula as well. Look for IFR to be a little more widespread along the east side of Kodiak and Fognak Islands. Otherwise, good VFR in the interior, except over here from about the White Mountains in that zone up to the north, across the Yukon River. Could be some marginal conditions there, and IFR now restricted to a small area on the western Arctic coast. But on the increase here with the system coming up, IFR spreading northward throughout the day, maybe holding off, getting into Lincoln and Glacier Bay until evening. And then for Wednesday morning, all the way across the southeast coast, IFR, much of the Gulf of Alaska and right along the coastline here, Kenai Peninsula, back down across Kodiak, VFR in the interior, and now marginal VFR just right or along or off the Arctic coast, and good VFR now even farther to the west there to the Pribilofs Wednesday morning. And by the afternoon, that more or less kind of holds out there in the same pattern with marginal conditions across the Aleutians. And then we've got IFR here from the Barren Islands along the coast, covering much of Prince William Sound, especially on the west side, and extending down across and off the coast yet, all the way over to the eastern border, but marginal VFR over down toward Dixon Entrance. Passes, Anaktuvuk and Adigan, both forecast to be VFR tomorrow throughout the entire day. Same forecast for Lake Clark and Merrill. Could start out marginal early, but will quickly become VFR for the remainder of the day. Same forecast for Rainy and windy, looking good, VFR. And both Isabel and Mentasta will be VFR tomorrow, but Portage, or Tanita also VFR, and now Portage probably will be marginal, could for a short time at midday become VFR, and then back to the marginal VFR as some more moisture rolls up from the southeast. And for Chilkoot and White, marginal becoming IFR. Freezing levels, 4,000 feet here across southern Alaska, down to the Aleutians, or the Alaska Peninsula to the Aleutians, falling back to 2,000 feet right near Nunivak Island, but extending up to south side of the Berks Range. At the surface now, we've got down across the Seward Peninsula, all of the North Slope, and then we've got 6 to 8 to 10,000 foot freezing levels coming up over the southern Panhandle. Icing-wise, just some spotty areas here over the eastern and northeast interior out to the Arctic coast. Better chance here at Kodiak Island of actually even seeing some isolated areas of moderate rime icing there that'll extend across the Gulf of Alaska right into the central and southern southeast coast, all of which will be moving northward and northwestward throughout the day. For the jet stream here, good southwest flow, about 120 knots here right into the southeast coast as that next low pulls northward, and it'll be bringing all the rainfall and moisture with it, with the main upper low back out here to the west. Drier, cooler northeast winds aloft here out over the Bering Sea from the southwest coast. 9,000 foot winds, roughly mostly easterly here, 15 to 20 knots with kind of a zone of 20 to 30 and maybe even 35 knot winds here coming from the Yukon and into the central interior and then down to the southwest coast and continuing out of the north there across the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, and then lighter winds with high pressure out west. And 3,000 feet, again where we saw 9,000, 50 knot winds here, 40 to 45 at 3,000, turn easterly at about 30 across the North Gulf Coast, 20 to 25 Kodiak Island, and then 15 to 25 knot winds here covering much of the central and even down to southern interior, picking up to 30 knots, Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Turbulence-wise, a swath of light to isolated moderate chop here, below 4,000 feet across the central interior, down across Yukon Delta coast, Pribilofs to the eastern Aleutians, also along the North Gulf Coast.
We always knew the site was there, but we thought it was gone due to erosion. My grandfather would tell about the bow and arrow wars. about two kids, playing with darts. And one eye was poked, so the other kid's father came and did the same thing. So from that, it became a full-blown war. To see this excavation bring that story alive is one of the most fascinating things I've seen. I mean, the stories we've heard and the evidence they're pulling out from Nunasuk, it's no longer a legend, it's becoming a fact.
My name is Rick Connect, and I'm principal investigator of the project. We have 11 PhDs. We use a lot of student volunteers. We work with professional conservators to make it all happen. We've got Dr. Paul Ledger, who's working on the history of climate here. Dr. Veronique Forbes, who's an archaeoentomologist who studies insects. Dr. P.T. Ashlock, who's also a professional archaeologist from Southeast Alaska. Dr. Madonna Moss is from the University of Oregon, who specializes in faunal analysis.
There are mussel shells throughout this site. There's another bigger piece, and we don't know where they're coming from.
The Nunalak site was originally a village. Elders tell us that this site extended out about 200 feet. Since 2009, we've lost more than 30 feet on that piece of shoreline. And our 2009 and 2010 excavation blocks are completely gone already. It's very much a race against time. But this particular structure with a covered boardwalk running down the middle of it was an adaptation to the bow and arrow wars. That was a period of intense conflict between different native villages here in the YK Delta. And no one knew exactly when it had happened other than it happened before the Russians arrived. This collective communal house was burned down by attackers from another village up the Kuskokwim. We think it happened about 1640 based on carbon dates of the charred grass and so on the floor.
We've been excavating Nunasuk for about 6 years now. I sent Rick a few pictures of artifacts I had from the locals. He came right over. He didn't even unpack. He went down the beach and they started walking and they started finding artifacts. Those first group was a tough bunch. There's these 3 students and a professor that come down and start looking for artifacts. Wind, rain, shine, they do it. My mind was saying, man, these guys are crazy. But they're trying to beat the erosions.
We get bugs, we get weather, we get wind, we get rain. Ouch, there's one now. And so they're pretty challenging conditions. We put in as many hours as we physically can, 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, just so we can get to it in time.
Pizza! Give me pizza!
Rick's just great. He doesn't stop. He's a perfect person for this site. I wouldn't have no one else run this site except him.
Well, I first came to Alaska to work as a graduate student in 1983, and luckily it was a preserved site much like this one in Kodiak. And that one was also eroding, and we worked hard to get a sample from that, but at the same time our assumption was there were going to be more sites like that, and the whole thing washed out. There wasn't even a rock, a firecracked rock left behind. That was shocking. And we ended up only getting a 10% sample at best, and that's not going to happen again. We're getting things that normally you just see in museum collections. We've got arrows with the feathers still lashed to them, grass rope that was used to make dog harnesses, that kind of preservation.
There's a piece of hair right here. I found that in my screen. PT found a ridiculously large amount of hair, and Bridget found another huge clump of hair today. It seems like when they cut their hair, they just let it fall wherever it wanted to, so. There's the lamp. The hair is kind of sticking out right there. It's all over the place, actually. There's been way hairier lamps, too. It's like, oh, you find hair and you're like, oh, this is like a hair sample, and then you dig a little more and then it's actually a lamp.
Bridget found an earring in the screen.
Yeah, that's definitely fawn.
Yeah. And then I would have it goes up to about there, I think. So I don't know how they actually wore them, like how it fit in.
Yeah, they kind of look like clip-ons.
Yeah.
I've heard that we're up to around 30,000 museum quality pieces, which will be coming back to Queen Hawk in 2017. We're hoping to get a cultural center built here, and then I'm hoping all the artifacts will remain in the village.
We estimate the site might have 5 to 10 years left, maximum. It could be lost in one big winter storm. It's like museums on fire or a library, and you have to rush in and save as many books and pieces of art as you can. And we're seeing things that people remember from their childhoods. Elders have a chance to reacquaint themselves and their children with tangible remains of their heritage.
Yeah, this project's been great. I'm just honored to be part of it, a small part of it.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, beginning to expand a little bit here with new ice forming both mostly up here along the main ice edge, and then we still have the area extending to the south. And again, colder air expected to move in across the area here over the next few days, so probably see an increase in the increasing ice here coming up. Moving on to coastal water forecasts. For the southeast coast, on the south coast, 20 to 25 knot winds, so small craft advisories with those 10 to 11 foot seas, 25 knots Clarence Strait with seas building to 7 feet, and then coming down to 15 knots for Stevens Passage, and really light southeast breeze there for Lynn Canal, 5 knots with slight seas. Southeast becomes east here on the north coast up to 30 knots. And then for the Wednesday outlook, again, another front redevelops and moves to about the same position. A little bit stronger gradient here, a tighter gradient, so that'll bring gales into the south coast, and then falling back to 25 knots with 10-foot seas in the north, 25 knots from the southeast, both for Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait. Prince William Sound tomorrow, light northerlies at 15, but Gulf of Alaska with the front advancing east coming up to 30 knots. Northeast gales there, western North Gulf Coast of the Barrens. Small craft advisories for southern Cook Inlet and the Kachemak Bay area. Wednesday, north 25, southern Cook Inlet to Kachemak Bay, northwest 20 for the Barrens, and small craft advisories east-southeast 25 to 30 for the North Gulf Coast, northeast 15 in Prince William Sound. And for Kodiak and Shelikof Strait here, northeast 40 knots tomorrow, and gales even from Sitkinak to about Castle Cape, and then small craft advisories there, Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev. And on the north side, we've got northeast at 15 and about 20 for Bristol Bay. Then for Wednesday, north, Bristol Bay at 20 knots. And also here on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, south side becoming northwest at 20, 25 knots from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, as well as Shelikof Strait, holding on to those 35 knot gales there for the east side of Kodiak Island. Fox Islands tomorrow, eastern Aleutians, north 20 knots and seas running 7 to 4 feet. And that pretty uniform wind pattern on out to Adak and Atka, northerlies at 20, and then coming down and becoming more northwest and lighter out from Amchitka beyond. And for Wednesday, north to northwest 10 to 15, winds increasing as you head east here, northwest about 20 for especially Atka Island, eastward, and north to northwest 20 to 25 knots there, mostly across Unalaska Island. And for the southwest coast, northeast at 20 for tomorrow. St. Lawrence Island, not too bad with northerlies roughly at about 15. and those seas running 5 feet, pick it up to 20 knots for St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs. And the Wednesday outlook shaping up like this: northwest 20 here across the northern Bering Sea, increase to 25 knots to the Pribilofs, and north 25 south of Nunivak Island. Winds stay light up there around St. Lawrence Island. And for the Arctic coast, we've got westerlies at 20 knots here for the central and east side, and then those pick up to 25 knots as you approach demarcation point, and seas 7 to as high as 8 feet coming up with those winds tomorrow. On the west side, southwest 15, and here from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, south at 15, and then it gets a little more squirrely and more variable here, northeast at 10 for the Chukchi Sea and 4-foot seas. And then moving on to Wednesday's outlook, we've got east at 15, turning southeast, turning south on the central coast, all the way down, and then 20-knot winds here between Cape Beaufort and Cape Thompson, and then light southerlies there on down to the Bering Strait. For tonight, again, we've got passing areas of light snow along the Arctic coast, one moving off to the east, another one coming in from the west, high pressure to the south, keeping it mostly up to the north. And then we've got really pretty fair conditions over the interior, chance of a few scattered showers along this dissipating trough. Next storm spreading rain and wind northward into the southern panhandle, and a portion of that initially pulling back to the west here across Kodiak Island with rain. And then for tomorrow, bulk of the moisture now from a roughly Yakutat or Cape Yakataga down across the panhandle. Rain heavy at times, and again the winds coming mostly small crafts as I mentioned, and then showers behind the front, more showery of the precipitation toward Kodiak Island, and really hanging along the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Definitely drier and more sunshine as you move inland, especially over the western interior. And then the outlook for Wednesday, another system actually develops and moves northward along the main boundary with heavy rain and wind for the panhandle. That's a look at the weather. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.